that's super interesting because I want to rescue what Steve talked about the hierarchy of sounds. For me, like you're talking about how the enemy sound have to be prioritized on the ally, like friend sounds. I think that's super important because that will give us, like a kind of a hierarchy of okay, so what sounds do we need to prioritize? At least, for example, if we're producing those sounds, right? So maybe we have to focus more on, getting certain sounds first, and then we can have, other sounds later. But also how to make them behave in a mixing kind of world, right? For example, in Wise, and I bet in UE5 we'll have that same thing about the monitor control or the mixing console is called in Wise. And what you can do is just, having, trigger several sounds at the same time. And with certain parameters, you can start tweaking sounds, adding reverbs and stuff, and make call to certain events to vote, for example, what it will happen if those kind of steps are in this certain kind of room or hallway or blah, 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 blah. And see, like most importantly, our master fader, that we have to make sure it doesn't click, right? Maybe we're adding also music, so it gets a little bit like very complex. So I think we can talk like a lot about mixing Wise, how sound effects in that case have to be like really, really on top of the music.
It's just a seamless, immersive experience. It's incredibly technically advanced under the hood, but it's lost on the player. But if you didn't have that subtlety, if you didn't have those shifts, if you didn't have that artistry to it, it would just sound horrible. It would just sound horrible.
Yeah, I think that's called the RTPC and Wise, for example, real-time parameter controllers. So how good are you, like, assigning stuff or objects, and how the music or sound are reacting to it. For example, I know if the saber goes a little bit faster, you have that RTPC shifting a little bit, that audio sample, I don't know, like a little bit sooner or maybe faster, right? With a little bit increasing its pitch or something like that, and you can do it in real time. So that's really awesome.
And another thing you'll have to worry about that the player will never understand is input lag and response lag, especially in VR, right? So you can't rely on that button press being exactly tied to the frame that thing collides or appears or whatever.
That is and it's the same thing when we trigger virtual libraries. It's the exact same thing. We're triggering, like our key, and it's not going to happen at the same time. It's just like a little bit delayed, if we're triggering like a violin library, and then you will get access to, to an audio sample, and it will trigger a legato or a short, depending on the sound value you selected. It's the exact same feeling, and you're like thinking that you're playing that instrument, but you're only navigating between samples inside multiple folders, for example. There's different levels of how you can approach programming or your level of knowledge. For example, I had like some small courses of C++, but I'm not into like programming, like barely like a beginner level. But for example, I can provide these useful tools that communicates effectively in a kind of a C++ manner to their programmers. Or for example, I can create small batches of events on Wise. So when there's time to program the audio stuff on the engine, they just plug Wise into the program and they just call for events instead of creating all the code from scratch. So you can have all these kind of small added values to your service when it comes to programming, right?
Of any postmortems or books or talks talking about iterative design and like sound design working well or not well?
Off the top of my head, I'll point you in directions. Again, the GDC Vault is probably the best repository for that stuff because they'll do entire hours on
whatever you want.
Yeah. Attenuation. It's like, who cares, right? Except you all care passionately about this stuff, and I'll go deep on it. So GDC Vault Gamma Sutra, which is now like game developer.
They have some good stuff there, though.
Yeah, and both of those have archives going back decades.
Honest stuff.
Yeah, at Kama Sutra. Then you have Audio Kinetic channel on Twitch.
Mhm.
Oh, those guys invite, like, once they get each game gets released, they invite all the audio team and they talk about their integration as long as they use one. Most of the time it is. So
Yeah,
they go
most
really
of the
deep
games
into
are wise.
very specific stuff. Yeah, they go into the session and they will explain about anything. So Audio Kinetic is a company who made Wise, and they have a Twitch channel, and they always go live each Thursday most of the time, and they will invite composers, sound designers, entire audio teams, blah 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 blah. And they really dig into the important stuff.
Fun stuff, yeah.
I'll ask you a question. So last year, pandemic, your students were all over Central and South America, working with our teams when we were still in Plano, but here. Were there any, I'm trying to think of a way to ask this question, which is, are there skill sets that they can be developing on listening to feedback, getting feedback, even if it's super remote and far away?
Yeah, so the way we work, I started like asking, like my students who would want to join, and they needed to have these skills ready. For example, music production, that they need to know about working on the DAW, and also send some of the portfolios so I can see some of their work, right? And after that, we'll meet each week so we can hear each other's work. And moreover, it's not just the music, but the communication. How are they doing with the teams? Are they communicating effectively? Do they understand you being like with, maybe there was a Colombian guy with his accent, and maybe it could be some trouble. It was like, no, I'm perfectly fine. Like, okay, awesome. So now let's jump into the music. So all these kind of things. So communication first, and make like a certainty that all the composer gets the vision and what they really need to deliver to the game developers, and from there we start working on the music. So always will be communication first, then let's see the music, right? In that case.
And then working with your GD,
Cowbell.
more cowbell.
It needs more cowbell.
So a pro tip, like yesterday I told you about the proposal kind of stuff that I really like to be on a Zoom meeting or something before sending it just by itself as a PDF. But also I started like since last year, and I found it like very effective, like Dr. Frank said, like instead of also like sending the files, make a Zoom meeting and let them hear it with you. But now I know that Zoom, when you share sound on Zoom, there has a compression, and I think it just shares it on a mono kind of signal.
You have to go through and check all the boxes at the bottom. They've added the new music things where you have to enable stereo, enable high resolution sound. But even then, for sound design, it's terrible because it compresses down at about, you won't get any sound above 16 kilohertz. It reduces all the things that we use to localize sound occur in the 16 to 20 kilohertz register. And that's the first thing that gets cut in MP3 and then audio compression for the internet. So we always say it takes every sound and it flattens it to 2 dimensions instantly.
So there's this plugin called Audio Movers, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the company Audio Movers, and they have a plugin that it's Listen To, okay? So with Listen To, you put it as a plugin in your master channel in your DAW, and then you share the screen. You send like a link, it's a web link to your GD or to your film director, and they will stream it via that web. So the audio will be from the web and not from Zoom, and you will have like really high fidelity audio from there. It's going to be delayed like 1-2 seconds, but it's okay. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, Michael Voss did that because his studio had that, so he shared all of his, and Aiden did as well. It was great. You get really good full range fidelity. But I will say it was choppy. It depends on your connection. Yeah, I was surprised how stable it was.
Yes.
We only had a few chops, but there are a couple of different HD audio. You look up that and HD audio streaming services, and outside the latency of a couple of seconds, it can deal with things.
Sorry, just one last comment about, like all this value that we're getting from Dr. Frank and Steve. I think it goes back to mixing voice, right? And the way we're delivering to the game's console, right? So you're making a game and you know, or you should know where it's going to go. If it's going to be to the computer speakers, to a 5.1 system, because you're just focusing on a movie that's going to be released maybe in a cinema or maybe on a home theater, or is it a mobile game, right? If it's a mobile game, you should know that low frequencies on a mobile game, they don't exist. So it goes back to what we said on Monday, yesterday, about what if there's dialogue on a movie, right? Or even, in a video game, it's going to go down, right? The same goes to limitations on reproducing the sounds on certain speakers, right? If it's going to a cell phone, it doesn't matter, like what Frank said about the high frequencies, the same thing applies on, on a double bass. If you have like a motif on a double bass playing on the low register on a mobile game, forget about it. It's not going to happen. Okay, so, and that's a waste of your time on composing, right? So be clever on where you're composing for, what element, what devices.
Well, we ran over, but in a very good way. I love a good discussion, and as I said, the discussion doesn't end when the recording does. Recording stops. So keep in touch with us on that, and thanks again, Steve, for coming in, and Guido today.